Okay, so this video is just close-ups of points I've shown before. I'm going to start with the Martindale and probably some Bandies in here too, and maybe a related point. I'm not sure if this is a Martindale or a Bandy. It probably is not, but I'm going to show it up close anyway. Try to show you all sides plus the cross section plus the notching. Now, these are all going to be real artifacts. They are all broken. Yep. Some of you guys don't really care too much for broken points, but that's all I've got. I don't have any of these archaic styles in complete form. I've got some complete ones that are much later, true arrowheads that are complete, but these from the archaic period and atlatl dart period, they're all broken. Okay. One comment I do have on these is that the bases have a definite effort to dull them down slightly. I don't know if it's from pecking or grinding, pecking with a pressure flaker or slightly abrading, but there's an effort to make these edges less sharp than the edges along the blade. And the bases are thicker than the blade. That's one characteristic of Martindale, is a thick base or thick stem. Here I go again. Thick stems are common on Martindales. This one obviously has some heat damage and is resharpened, reworked. I'm filming with daylight on these videos because I think the daylight shows the flake scars much better. And you can also see the translucency on some of these. Now, some Martindales have a point in the base and some are rounded. Not very many have a twist. Not very many have beveling, but there is a common feature in some of these, in most of these, is the edge work, where it's very careful pressure flaking. This one here has a line of step fractures. I don't know if it's due to resharpening, probably resharpening, but it could have been made like that from the beginning. Again, a little bit of heat damage. It appears that a good percentage of these ended up in the fire for some reason. Now, as far as preparation of meat back in the day. A lot of it was dried and not cooked over the fire. So the fact that these are heat damaged is a little mysterious to me, because it'd be one thing if most of the animals were cooked over the fire in large chunks, right? And then these points remained inside the animal somewhere and then ended up in the fire because of the cooking. But back in the day, most of the meat, as far as I know, was cut and dried for storage and not cooked immediately. And a lot of it was actually eaten raw right after the kill. So how these ended up in the fire is kind of a mystery. Or, it could have been left on the surface and then forest fires or whatever caused these pops. Some of these have obvious impact fractures. Some of these have very bold pressure flaking, and some of them have very fine pressure flaking. It seems to be random. These are an early archaic type, these Martindales. So they became proficient early on in the notching. Not very many with basal or stem damage. Impact fractures with very little stem damage is common. And I'll review this video and see how I can improve it. I might be having my fingers in the front of the edges too much, so I'll try to reduce that. Okay, these are borrowed points. Now I have some of my own. These two are from just random sites. I don't know where they came from. This one has some impact damage. It's very robust. Nice translucency. Maybe some twist in this blade. Now this may not be a Martindale. I just have it as a Martindale in my collection. I might revise this to a different style of point, but I think it's robust enough to be a Martindale. Usually with this style, if it's a different point, it won't be this thick. You know what I mean? If it's a later type or a different type, they're usually thinner. Martindales are characteristically robust. Okay, now these, let's see, these two are from the same site. I just received a collection that was gifted to me, and I'll be showing a lot of it in the coming videos. And I've got a lot of stuff sitting outside that are not actual projectile points. They're like nutting stones, and I have some worked flakes, scrapers, adzes, and stuff like that. But these two came from that site. And I did write on this one, Martindale. The base is in extremely good condition with the tip crushed through impact. That's very, very strong impact. The width is just over 3/4, so I would say that qualifies as that little dart point. It's wider than most that I have. Inch and 3/4. There's also a millimeter scale on this. 45 millimeters. And you can imagine where the tip would be, because these sides are usually pretty straight. Now this one, I don't know if it's a Martindale. I just guess that it is. The base or the stem is pretty narrow. 5/8. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing on the Edgework? Just to review, there's wear, you know, from obviously from it being used, but the amount of small flakes is very few. There's not a lot of small retouch flaking going on, except on the base of these. And this time I do mean the base, right along the bottom. Okay. So that was the Martindale. Now I have some Frios. These are a much later time period, several thousand years later. And these do exhibit, a lot of edge work, pressure flaking, and shaping along the edge, the main edge, as well as along the base and within the notches. The notches themselves are worked usually pretty heavily to create that shape. Starting with the larger ones first. As you can see, the material varies. They use whatever they had available. And I would imagine some of it's heat treated, some of it's not, depending on the quality of the stone. If it was poor quality, it was probably heated. Lots of little step fractures. They weren't too concerned about it with this particular type. The ears are variable. There was no set pattern. Sometimes the ears extend past the edge of the main blade, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're exactly in line. And there's no size standard either. Although a lot of these have narrow necks, so they were at little dart points. This one's exactly at 3/4 of an inch. Now, personally, I think I can learn a lot more from broken points than completed points, because the broken ones usually show, or you can kind of figure out how they were broken, either through impact or bending stresses, or you can see some use wear along the edges or retouching along the edges, or something may be broken in manufacture, so you get to see the earlier stage of the point. When I first started napping, I asked collectors if they were willing to give me some of their broken points, and they said sure. So I got a bunch that way. The serious collectors, you know, they like to have the G10 fully full points so they can display them. You know, broken points really don't display very well. And I've seen some people try to figure out how to use the broken points in a display, and they just end up, in my opinion, ruining the educational opportunity by, you know, fixing the points within a frame or gluing them together or gluing them to a frame in batches together, all kind of mixed up from different time periods and whatnot. And it doesn't allow us to look at or isolate each grouping of points so we can see common features and so forth right next to each other. So, but I don't mind seeing completed points in a frame because, you know, what you see is what you get. You just get the final, you know, the final completed piece, what was done at the end of the process. And sometimes those completed points have use wear, but usually they don't have very much. But this also tells me how they were broken in the haft. And if these ears are vulnerable to breakage, and obviously they are. You know, several of these I've shown, in fact, I think most of them have some tip damage on the ears, if not the whole ear broken off. So that was a weak point in this design, either intentional or unintentional. I don't know. Now this one's an interesting one because this is a hybrid between Ensor and Frio. Very small. Everything else the same. Flaking patterns the same if there is any. Notching developed the same way, just on a very small scale. And I think I do have an Ensor here. I mean, I would classify this as an Ensor point, and maybe even the same type. This is from my collection. This is a borrowed one. These would have normally longer blades. This may have been reworked. But these are Transitional Archaic, I believe, just before the introduction of the bow and arrow, during the late prehistoric period. And this could almost fit on an arrow. Let's see. I've got one of my other arrow points here. Another copy of an Apache style arrow. So it is larger, but you can imagine it maybe hafted to a very thin foreshaft, very narrow or small diameter foreshaft. And atlatl darts do range in diameter. They don't have to be very thick. This has some impact damage. Damage to this side here. So this is either an Ensor or Ensor Frio. It has a bit of a twist in it. It is damaged quite a bit, and I can't tell if it's hafting damage in combination with a small notch in the base or not. Okay. Could be just pure hafting damage, or it could be also a combination. This is one of mine also, from a random site. That Ensor was from a random site. I don't know where that comes from. Now this one is from the same site as these, from my recent collection that I got. Dusty, if you're watching, thank you very much. Yeah, I had a hard time figuring out what was going on with this, so I wrote foot on here, which is another name for the ear. Lots of different names for these parts of the projectile point. Okay. All right, so that's it for that. We'll move on to the next one.